This is Daryo and I'm Tony, and joining us today is Ambassador Konstantin Obolensky from the Swiss Embassy here in Tashkent. Ambassador, welcome.
Thank you very much, Tony. I'm excited to be here today with you and with your viewers.
We're very happy to have you here with us. As I know it, you've been here since 2021. How's your experience been here in Tashkent?
Tashkent is a great place to be posted to as a diplomat, as an ambassador. Uzbekistan is a thriving country, interesting, developing, with reforms ongoing, and at the same time with a very, very rich history that it is built upon. The society, I think people know that they are from a very ancient culture, and I find it always so impressive to interact with people from all walks of life, actually.
Speaking of your history here, the embassy's history is a lot longer, obviously. Switzerland has had relations with Uzbekistan since around 1993, 1994, since just after its independence from the Soviet Union. Can you talk a little bit on why or what drew Switzerland to here to develop relations with Uzbekistan?
You know, in 1992, when Switzerland actually recognized the independence of Uzbekistan and started to take diplomatic relations with the country, and that was before the embassy was established here. But already at that time, it was very clear to us that Uzbekistan was going to be an important actor in Central Asia, in the whole region of Central Asia. And Switzerland and Uzbekistan already at that time or quickly started to share relations in very different aspects. There was the constituency that Switzerland is leading in the World Bank and the IMF, and then later also in the EBRD, where Uzbekistan is a member of this constituency. And this is a very close cooperation that we enjoy, our two countries enjoy in this format, but then there are many others. You have mentioned Switzerland has established an embassy already quite early in Uzbekistan, and we have always maintained it. The relations, they have grown, and the relations have maybe not always grown in a linear way, but they have absolutely grown and intensified. So Switzerland has then also started a bilateral program in international cooperation, besides the usual diplomatic work that has always been ongoing. And this international cooperation program, it has then also intensified, especially after 2017.
Of course, with the change of the administration, we see a lot of Uzbekistan opening up since then, in terms of trade, the capital markets, even just flows of tourists coming into the country. Everything's been made a little bit easier.
I think many things have been made a bit easier, and it's also, you know, it's also this general atmosphere of it's a place where there is much to develop, yes. To develop together. And you have mentioned tourism, yes, of course, and the reason for abolishing the visa requirement for short-term visitors by Uzbekistan, that is to attract tourists, and tourism is a very dynamic sector in Uzbekistan, and Switzerland is very happy also to cooperate there in this field. We will talk about that a little bit later.
Yes. As I recall from some research I did online, there are more than 20 Swiss enterprises actively engaged here in Uzbekistan. Do you have any insights into how or where they are involved?
But they are involved in very different fields, partly in textile. Then there is in the field of water, in the field of infrastructure, so participating in the infrastructure works going on in Uzbekistan, engineering. services. So it is relatively wide. It's also financial services. So it's really going. It's quite wide.
Quite diverse.
Diverse, and it is also, and of course, pharmaceuticals. You should never underestimate the pharmaceutical sector for Switzerland, and then also for each society, because health is a very primary interest, of course, of everybody, and to get good and effective medicine is something that the Swiss pharmaceutical sector is working on.
And how do you see that panning out here in Uzbekistan?
In Uzbekistan, we are supporting the government institutions in their quest also to reform the vocational education and training. It's a project which is called VET for Uz, so vocational education and training for Uzbekistan. And so there it is about systems, it's about, again, the curriculum, but it is also, when it comes very practically, we do work in our project VET for Uz, with the hospitality sector in Uzbekistan. We have already said before, it's a thriving sector, and there we work together also with the hoteliers, hotel association, so that again, that the market and the practical aspect is very much involved also in this project.
I really liked the insight of how SMEs and that balance between vocational training and university degrees really support the economy of Switzerland, and hopefully it will do the same here in Uzbekistan. Because as it stands, most students you ask here, they either want to be businessmen or accountants or lawyers or doctors. And it's caused like an oversaturation. And it would be very interesting to see that more people move into the vocational training. I see it more actively in the digital sphere with the IT park and various accelerator programs. But even then, you still see a lot more of the young people pursuing university degrees. How do you think we could bring more awareness to the value of vocational training?
Well, it's part of our program as well to advertise, to speak about vocational education and training. But of course, there again, there are traditions in each country, in each society, and everywhere in the world, parents want the best for their children. And if newer forms of education are introduced, then that will, of course, also take some time until people see that it is actually worth.
The value is realized.
That the value is realized, exactly. And also in Switzerland, you also need to convince people that it's actually good to send their child if they're not brilliant academicians. I mean, that's a different story. But if there are people who have, thorough practical skills, then it's good for them to go on to pursue this path.
They could be good mechanics. They could.
Yes, and then a few years later, they add maybe I don't know, a bachelor in some management or so, and then in the end they own the place.
Uzbekistan is still in its process of its accession into the WTO, and they've recently just finalized one of their steps in pushing it forward. It's been taking some time. I know this process has been going on since the 90s. And how do you see it progressing, or at least speeding up a little bit in the next few years, hopefully less than that?
It's a big step for a country because when you access WTO, it has very direct implications also on your own legislation, on the way business and public finances are managed. So it is a long process usually. All the member states of the WTO need to agree with the candidate. And a few countries are usually like the focal points and during the negotiations to close chapter after chapter. So yes, it's a long process, and we believe it's a very beneficial process. For Switzerland it has been very beneficial, and for world trade in general. So we believe it will also be beneficial for Uzbekistan to conclude these negotiations and to become a member of the WTO.
And Uzbekistan is already in the process of liberalizing its markets, which before it was very state-controlled. Mm-hmm. But in the last few years, it's opening up. We're seeing a lot of IPOs coming out, a lot of privatization efforts coming through, and I feel like this would only help towards that accession. At least it aligns with WTO standards.
Yes, I mean, you are right. The privatization of the economy is according to the WTO principles. The question is whether you privatize before or after. That is an issue which remains to be looked at. Well, in principle, a private sector is strengthening the economy of a given country. At the same time, the institutions need to be strong as well, strong and democratic and accountable. That is clear. But I think they go hand in hand. A private sector needs to be accompanied by a strong state, which sets the rules, so that monopolies, for instance, would not materialize.
How do you see Uzbekistan's economy developing? How do you see the capital markets coming through and the climate for investors coming here?
Well, for such a development, we spoke before about reforms in general, and we spoke about WTO accession and so on. The climate, and we see it with the upcoming Investors Forum, the climate has changed a lot in the last several years. There is more interest also by Swiss companies in the Uzbek market. There is an interest also to invest. I couldn't now say any numbers right now, but an interest is there. But of course, companies are looking very thoroughly at the real opportunities they have, at the security they have also with regards to that to that field before they take the step to invest. Our bilateral trade, it has really grown. It's growing on a long term. I believe there is much room to achieve more, but last year we had, in 2023, we had a 50% increase of trade of about 150 million US dollars. No, overall it was last year. It was 150 million, which is not which is not the top. I believe our two countries can achieve. There is much more that can be achieved, but so far, at least, the trend is a growing one, and I think that is always the most important.
Oh, 100%. And we've seen the IMF, the World Bank, and various other institutions give forecasts for Uzbekistan and the region's growth, and it's all been very stable and has shown like actual real growth as opposed to decline. Mm-hmm. And I think that is also very promising. That
is very promising, yes. And let's hope that this can be sustained and that there will be more and more opportunities for Swiss and Uzbek companies and actors to work together.
And as I know it, this weekend there's a jazz festival, or is it next week?
So in early May, the jazz festival, Tashkent International Jazz Festival, will start, and this year again we will be participating in this jazz festival, and we are very much looking forward. We have a band from Switzerland, Yumi Ito is her name, and her band will perform at 3 different places on the 1st, on the 2nd, and on the 3rd May in Tashkent. On the 3rd May, it will be outside the Forum Palace, I think is the name. You know? So that's the official appearance of her in the jazz festival, and it will be open to the public and free of charge. So it will be I think it will be a great night, and we are all very much looking forward to it.
And how can local musicians find out about the masterclass?
There is an official program of the festival, and it is being uploaded. And then, of course, as always, Switzerland or the Embassy of Switzerland is playing on its social media channels, Facebook and Instagram, and there all the information will be published in due time.
As we know, Central Asia has an issue with water. There are 2 main rivers and 2 main sources that all of these countries share with each other. And there's a lot of issues about building dams in certain areas, as the Kosh-Tepe Canal that has been built by the Afghan authorities. That's also caused some issues. We have the Aral Sea. That is another big crisis that we have. You and your mission, you are quite involved with water diplomacy here. Can you talk a little bit about what you got going on?
Well, thank you for your assessment that I would subscribe to. So I believe it is very true. Uzbekistan and Central Asia as a whole is undergoing, a stress in this very vital resource, the resource of water. We have talked about growing population before. And this combined with climate change that is happening and that is visible, and I think there is no need to convince people about climate change anymore, and especially not in Central Asia. So there is a necessity to work or to use the water resources in a sustainable and also in an efficient manner. And Switzerland has been active in this field already for many years, and 10 years ago in 2014 Switzerland and the 5 Central Asian states they have agreed that there should be also really a Blue Peace initiative working in this sense, so that the water resources are being used in a peaceful way throughout Central Asia. And this approach has been also reconfirmed 3 years later, and since then Switzerland is very, very active in this field. Again, it's always important, and it remains important, that riparian states, that they actually speak to each other, and that solutions are found through diplomatic means, and solutions that are sustainable for everybody involved.
Sustainability, yes.
Sustainability, it's yes. I mean, it became such a fashionable word, but in the end, it's what does sustainability mean? It's to have a long-term perspective, which maybe goes further than our immediate needs, but the long-term needs.
That is true, and it's all about managing those needs. So, moving on from sustainability and sustainable development, how do you see sustainable development and inclusive development going on here in Uzbekistan, and how is the embassy involved with that?
You know, we have been speaking about the international cooperation that Switzerland has in Uzbekistan. And maybe let me take one step back. We have 3 pillars, 3 domains that Switzerland is actively involved in. The first is water. We have already spoken about that, both nationally and regionally. Then there is a second domain, which is sustainable economic development, that Switzerland is focusing here on in Uzbekistan. And the third is governance issues, and including also support to the cultural program of the embassy. now we speak about the sustainable economic development. We have spoken before about the vocational education and training. This is part of this program, of this domain, because this shall lead our support. Our program shall lead to a more sustainably educated workforce in Uzbekistan. Secondly, there are plenty of projects where Switzerland is supporting groups of different kind. Besides the vocational education and training, Switzerland is also supporting small and medium enterprises in Uzbekistan. It is also supporting, for instance, ICT for Girls programs, which is really important to open up this kind of economic activities for boys and girls. So the whole idea is really to support Uzbekistan to have a inclusive and sustainable economy.
And then you just mentioned education. As I remember from our notes, is your mission has some projects related to vocational training, correct?
Yes, yes. You know, when you look, well, usually when we do international cooperation, bilateral international cooperation, then we focus on the fields where Switzerland is strong, where we have our own strengths. And Switzerland is economically a very successful country. It is a very globalized economy, and therefore we think we can add a few points that can be interesting for Uzbekistan. And vocational education and training is one of them, we believe. Because in Switzerland you have more than 2/3 of the young people, after those 9 obligatory school years that we have, they choose not the path to university, but they choose the path of getting a professional training to become professional electricians, bakers, office clerks, IT specialists.
So we've just touched a bit on the importance of vocational training for an inclusive and sustainable economy, and you've recently signed an MOU with the central bank here in Uzbekistan. Can you talk a little bit about that?
It's a great pleasure. It's a very successful program that Switzerland has with the central bank of Uzbekistan, and I had the pleasure to sign with the chairman of the Central Bank of Uzbekistan this memorandum of understanding. And so it's a continuous program where Switzerland is supporting the Central Bank of Uzbekistan and other central banks as well to strengthen their analytical and technical knowledge in very specific central bank topics, like macroeconomic stability, like monetary policy. These topics which are specific to central banks, and where the Swiss National Bank and other Swiss institutions have been supporting the Central Bank of Uzbekistan for a while.
And it's for those who are already employed by the central banks? Yes,
it's like an internal training program for specialized staff at the central bank, exactly.
And now we'll just shift onto a topic that is a little bit sensitive, which is human rights and civil liberties here.
Yeah, for us, human rights and promoting of human rights this obligation derives from our federal constitution of Switzerland, and also from international documents and conventions and organizations that our country is party of, and that Uzbekistan is also a party of. And so therefore the promotion of human rights is very important and very dear to us. We work together with civil society organizations, because in the end it's civil society that needs to closely monitor what and this takes place in every country, what their respective government, their respective institutions or large corporations and other actors, economic actors and societal actors, what they are doing. And so a strong civil society is, we believe, very much in the interest of every country.
And it breeds accountability.
Absolutely, accountability, which is so important when it comes to public finances, but also to other aspects, like, I don't know, financial planning. It can be everything. It can be water management. It can be gender-based violence, fighting against that, bringing this up, bringing it on a public and a political level as an issue, and asking for programs that would counter this problem and many others. It was only an example. Besides the strengthening of the CSOs, the civil society organizations, through the embassy, by the capacity building programs that we have for those, I see there is also one important hurdle for civic engagement in Uzbekistan, which are rather heavy administrative tasks that are planted upon those organizations. And the first is, of course, the registration process. That is a difficult process for the organizations. They need to be registered in order to be allowed to operate. And then there is a lot of reporting and financial and administrative and programmatic reporting, and all these are very high hurdles and cumbersome for the organizations, and they make their work much less effective, and they are diverting the resources from the actual activity that they should be doing to the more bureaucratic and heavy processes that I have just described. And this is expensive, both in time and in financial resources.
Which is unfortunate.
Which is unfortunate, and we would hope that that there will be found easier processes for the future.
Thank you so much. I know you are an extremely busy person, so I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us.
I thank you for your interest and for your curiosity. I think curiosity is actually a very positive trait that a person can have, and I really enjoyed very much this discussion.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.